This is the interesting part about making that comparison, Danny, is that I still think the Packers are really close. And it's why I am so annoyed to the point where I had to jump in with Clayton yesterday, where I just look at that situation. They're 28-8 over the last couple of years. I mean, if we're making a comparison to the Green Bay Packers right now for the Seahawks and where they're at, that would be good.
Right.
But we're talking about the overall stretch. We're not talking, I think, specifically about where Green Bay is. There is a danger that this is perhaps as far as Seattle over this run, 13-14, is as far as they will ever go in a playoffs.
Given what you've seen from Green Bay, how do you avoid the path they're on? That's the question I ask. It's not so much, does it perfectly hold up? Because it doesn't. Because Green Bay has been more successful these past 2 years than Seattle. And honestly, Rodgers has been back to the NFC Championship game 4 times? Four times since they won it? How do you keep from becoming the Green Bay Packers? Because right now you've got a situation where your quarterback in Green Bay is so mad that you've won 13 games each of the past 2 years, been farther in the playoffs than the Seahawks have since 2014, and he's so mad that people are now tracking his flights to Honolulu to try and determine whether or not he's going to audition for other teams.
Well, this is where you run into a really difficult thing to keep in mind. Don't let things get stagnant with the head coach. I mean, of all the things that maybe has held Green Bay back, that's always been a strong argument on that front. And while I don't think it's everything, I do look at some of those Mike McCarthy stories about him and how he perhaps did not have that same eye of the tiger as a head coach. And I wonder, okay, well, you got to make sure that the coach is committed. But you don't get that impression.
But no, wait, man, because they just switched head coaches. And it seems like Rodgers has gotten more upset about that. It seems like if that's true, that they stuck with McCarthy too long, that's possible. But they just switched head coaches, and Rodgers has become less happy with that.
He's less happy with the suits, right? I mean, it's not with the actual situation on the football field. It can't be. It's about them drafting.
He's always got to have somebody to blame. Or it's about always he's got to have somebody to blame. And here's where because there's 2 different prongs to this. The first is how do you keep your team once you get the franchise quarterback that then is taking up that much of your resources? How do you give him the best chance to get back to the Super Bowl? How do you outfit and surround him? And what's interesting in Green Bay is that everybody who says, well, Seattle should have built a better offensive line or needs to build a better offensive line, well, Green Bay is an example that's not a guarantee either. Do you need to build up the defense? Green Bay's tried to do that the past couple of years with the free agents that they've purchased.
It has been
better.
And
then the other part is, how do you manage your quarterback's ego? Especially if you've got a guy that tends to point fingers or make things a little bit more difficult. And I'm on team kiss Russ's butt, but I'm not sure that's the best way either, because Green Bay might have done a little bit too much of that, and look where it's got him, where he's still in a snit after you win 13 games to get to the NFC Championship.
How much control do you really have over the ego? I don't think you have much. I think you could try to accommodate, and it could backfire. I think you could perhaps do abrasive things, and maybe the quarterback actually delivers a little bit more when you do that. And, I mean, the Jordan Love draft pick did not work out on the field necessarily for the Packers, but you just saw Aaron Rodgers' possibly best career season. 48 touchdown passes. I mean, that's approaching the actual record. 4 touchdown passes in a season. So
I guess that's where we could start with the first lesson. Do not
draft a backup quarterback.
Do not draft a backup quarterback.
Well,
was it worth it?
If they had made it to the Super Bowl,
if you're Green Bay, didn't they screwed it up, right? If you're Green Bay right now, you look at it and they screwed it up. Even if drafting Jordan Love resulted in Aaron Rodgers deciding to prove you wrong, and it was a red hot fire poker of motivation, you only got 1 season out of it, and now things are a mess.
Yeah, you only got 1 season out of it, but you got a really good season out of it.
Yep.
We're talking about things completely differently. If they, I don't know, maybe. Well, now, shoot. There's another element here. You can't have a coach who's a coward. You can't have an organization that's scared in the big moment. And look, what's the commonality of the entire Aaron Rodgers 1-4 in NFC Championship games, where it actually is an Aaron Rodgers fault necessarily.
You know what? You're right.
I mean,
in both cases, it's McCarthy not going for it and kicking field goals against the Seahawks, and it's Matt LaFleur rolling out there. What were they at, 4th and 4?
Yeah.
And he decided to take the field goal when they could have tied the game with the
Right.
touchdown and a 2-point conversion.
Right. That is something you can't do either. But they've been close. I think Green Bay's been closer, and honestly, I feel like maybe saying it, oh, you don't want to run the same path as the Green Bay Packers. Honestly, I kind of do. I mean, they've been to a bunch of NFC Championship games. The Seahawks haven't been back in a while.
But that's the path that gets you talked about as an underachiever, right? Because the Packers are talked about in much of the same way. And maybe that is hollow. And maybe this is a result of winning a Super Bowl with a franchise quarterback, winning one, singular, is quite an accomplishment. And anything else you get after that is gravy. But I think on the entirety, people will look at it. Aaron Rodgers, you had the best quarterback in the game for a decade. Overall, over the past decade, Aaron Rodgers has been the best quarterback in the league. And it's paid off with one Super Bowl appearance. Did they get everything they could out of him? And I think the answer to that is no. Doesn't mean that they underachieved, but they didn't maximize their returns. Is there anything you can learn from that here in Seattle about making sure that you don't go down that same path? That you don't feel when Russ gets to be 37 or 38 and you start having to talk about planning for his replacement.
5 years from now, by the way.
Yeah, when you get to that point, because look, if they kind of follow the path that the Packers did and start getting back to NFC Championship games now, but not being able to get over the hump, then you're going to start feeling some of the same sort of things of what's the missing piece, what gets you over it. And oh, by the way, Drew Brees, he won a Super Bowl in his 4th year as the New Orleans Saints starter. And granted, he was older because he'd been in the league for a while at that point, but he didn't get back to the Super Bowl either. And they took a lot of different things. There's got to be things you can learn from why those teams didn't get back.
In the case of Brees was the problem at the very end with the best Saints teams that they've had. They've had their best teams, I think, over the last 3 to 4 years. I think they are on par with that Super Bowl team, if not better. With Green Bay, I don't really think that there is a lesson that can be applied from Green Bay to the Seahawks situation. And it sounds like a bit of a cop-out answer, but if we're grading everything in the context of, well, they only made it to 2 Super Bowls back-to-back because New England and Tom Brady now have been to, 10 Super Bowls or so over the past 20 years? I think it's entirely dependent on your opinion of underachieving. I can't say the Packers have underachieved the last 2 years. If you get to the Final Four, that cannot be a failure as the season goes. Now, what happens in that makes you reevaluate things. One team, like Kansas City, has reevaluated things a lot when they've lost in the Final Four and when they've lost in the Super Bowl. So honestly, maybe that's it. I mean, who's the team that's been most consistent the last 3 years? Yes, they have a young quarterback. Now they are paying that quarterback. It's drastic measures to change the course that you have been going in and hoping that that change in course leads to different results the next season.